The rain pounded against the windows, the wind howling like it had a personal vendetta. I was 15, shivering in soaked clothes, and my parents had just thrown me out. Their faces were cold, indifferent, as if the storm outside wasn't already enough punishment. My sister's smirk lingered behind them. Her lies had done this. She had whispered things about me, painted me as reckless, untrustworthy, and suddenly I was disposable. I couldn't argue, couldn't explain, couldn't reason. They didn't want to hear me. Get out, my father said, voice sharp, final. My mother didn't even look at me, just nodded in agreement, as if confirming some long-decided verdict. And I did. I stepped into the storm, heart racing, body shaking from the cold and the fear of being utterly alone. I ran, not knowing where I could go, each flash of lightning revealing the familiar streets in a distorted, eerie light. My bag, my few belongings, felt heavier than ever. I thought of the warmth of home, of the life I had built within those walls, and how quickly it had vanished because of a single lie. My sister had orchestrated this moment like a puppeteer, thinking she had the power to ruin me forever. Hey, if you enjoy my content, please subscribe and hit the bell. Your support means everything and helps me keep creating. Thank you so much. The rain soaked me through, mixing with tears I refused to show. I stumbled over puddles, trying to make sense of it all. 15 years old, alone in a storm, abandoned by the people who were supposed to protect me. And yet, beneath the fear and the humiliation, something flickered, a quiet, stubborn flame of defiance. I wouldn't stay broken. I couldn't. The words, get out, weren't the end. Somehow, even then, I knew they were just the beginning. The storm raged around me, but inside, I started plotting, not revenge, not hate, but survival, strength, a way to turn that cruel moment into something they could never take away. And in that storm, wet and shivering, I whispered to myself, you have no idea what this creates. The streets were nearly empty, the storm chasing me as I ran without direction. Every lightning strike illuminated the fear in my eyes, but also the determination hardening in my chest. I couldn't go back. My parents' house was no longer home. It was a place where lies ruled, where a single whisper from my sister had the power to cast me out. I had to survive on my own. And somehow, I knew this moment would shape the rest of my life. I found shelter in an abandoned bus stop, huddled under the thin roof, my clothes dripping, my hands numb. Hunger gnawed at my stomach, but fear gnawed at my mind more. Every sound of tires on wet pavement, every gust of wind through the street made me jump. I felt invisible, yet exposed, small in a world that seemed determined to swallow me. I thought about my sister, the cruel smirk on her face as my parents said those words. She had thought she'd won. She had no idea the fire she had lit inside me. Over the next days, I wandered, scavenging what I could. I slept in shelters, behind stores, in quiet corners where no one would notice a soaked, shivering teenager. I learned quickly how to avoid people, how to beg without looking desperate, how to find food when there was none. Survival became my focus. Each small success, each day I endured, built something inside me I had never had before, resilience. I also learned to observe people. The world outside my family's walls was harsher, stranger, but it was honest. I saw kindness in unexpected places. A shopkeeper who slipped me a sandwich, a man on the bus who gave me a dry coat when I shivered. And I saw cruelty too, those who would take advantage of weakness. I realized the truth. The world didn't care if I was 15, alone, scared. I had to take care of myself because no one else would. Months passed. I learned to read the patterns of life, to anticipate danger, to protect myself. And slowly, the anger toward my sister, toward my parents, transformed. It wasn't just rage, it was fuel. The lie that had thrown me out wasn't just a wound anymore. It was a spark for my own rise. Every insult, every betrayal, every night spent shivering in the cold became a lesson. They thought Get Out would break me. It didn't. It built me. By the time I turned 16, I was no longer the scared, abandoned child who had run into the storm. I was sharp, careful, resourceful. I found part-time work where no one would ask questions about my background. I saved, scrimped, learned how to manage money, how to negotiate, how to survive in a world that didn't care about my story. I kept track of everything, my sister's lies, my parents' indifference. And I vowed silently that one day they would see the person they tried to destroy. And in the quiet hours of the night, when the storm memories returned, I smiled. The words Get Out had intended to end me. Instead, they had started something. I wasn't just surviving. I was preparing to return on my own terms, preparing to turn the lie that had expelled me into the very reason I would never be powerless again. No one, not my parents, not my sister, could imagine how far that single moment of cruelty would push me. Every day alone, every stormy night, every small victory in the shadows. It all led to the inevitable truth. The person they thought they were discarding had only grown stronger, smarter, and unstoppable. And while they reveled in their false sense of control, I was already building a life that they could never take away. A life that would one day make them realize that Get Out doesn't end a story. It just begins the real one. By the time I turned 18, I was no longer the frightened, abandoned teen who had been thrown into the storm. I had a small apartment, a steady job, and the kind of independence I had never thought possible at 15. Every hardship I had endured, the cold nights, the hunger, the fear, had forged me into someone unshakable. I had learned to rely on no one but myself, and in that independence, I found power. I hadn't spoken to my parents or my sister in years. Their words and their lies had faded into background noise compared to the life I was building. But I never forgot. I kept track of them quietly, as one would track chess moves, knowing that someday the balance of power would shift. The world had taught me more about loyalty, manipulation, and human nature than my family ever had. Then the day came. A business opportunity, a startup I had nurtured quietly, took off faster than I could have imagined. Investors called, clients lined up, and suddenly the 15-year-old who had been abandoned had more influence, more wealth, and more control than anyone in my family could have predicted. My sister, who had laughed as I ran into the storm, now sent me messages I ignored. My parents, who had shrugged at my pain, suddenly wanted updates, explanations, apologies. I kept my distance. I had no desire to reconcile, not yet. The truth was, I didn't need them. Their dismissal, their cruelty, had only propelled me to heights they couldn't have imagined. And when I finally did step into their lives again, it wasn't as a child begging for acceptance. It was as an equal, a force they had never anticipated. The storm of that night had ended long ago, but the lesson remained. A lie can hurt, but it can also ignite a fire strong enough to reshape a life. When my sister finally realized that the girl she had mocked and betrayed had become a woman unstoppable in every way, her smirk vanished. My parents' smugness turned to shock, and for the first time, I saw their fear, not of me, but of the truth they had ignored for so long. I had turned their cruelty into my strength, their betrayal into my triumph.